Whirlwind Snooker. Please give a warm welcome to Archer. Now Archer, you've got quite a varied history really. Your childhood was quite varied too. You were in Hong Kong, New Zealand as well in your school days. What happened there?
That's because my parents split up and my dad escaped to the UK theoretically to earn enough money to keep us at school. So, which is great because I didn't go to school for a whole year.
Well, I mean, then, was that when you discovered your creative side at that point in your life?
Well, the first thing I really massively created that I spent a whole month on was nothing to do with computers or electronics. It's hard to explain. Who here remembers seeing Tom Baker as Doctor Who? Hey, what was his famous trademark? Scarf. Yeah. So I was like 10, 11 years old, and I didn't have any Meccano, so I traded lots of conkers at school to acquire a massive amount of Meccano, and ended up after a month and 5 attempts of building a machine that knits. Because I tried doing it by hand, because my gran taught me how to do it, and I thought, this is a pain in the arse, so I basically thought, I'll do a machine that does it. And it was a 1 foot square cube of Meccano. Used up every piece I could get out of my friends at school. And yeah, 5th attempt, you turn a handle, wool went in, and out came a knitted scarf. Wow. Yeah, now, I know this is supposed to be computers, but guess what?
We have a prop.
This first of many props. I gave up after a foot. And then I made a smaller one. But the funny thing is, you're asking about what was my first creativity. This is when I was 11 or 12, and 10 years later when I was at university, I was in Coventry, and we went around a lace factory, and they had old-fashioned 1850s jacquard loom machines, which looked remarkably like what I'd designed. So I'd reinvented something that I had no idea about age 12, and then thought, damn, so I can't mass produce it. Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one.
So, as a kid, did you kind of start taking household appliances to pieces and stuff like that?
Yeah, what it was me and a few mates were at school one day, and we threw a telly off a wall into a rubbish area, and it fell apart into lots of pieces, and all these colourful little components came out. So, after we sort of vandalised it, I thought, actually, that looks a bit interesting. And next day I went back with a pair of household pliers and started pulling all these bits out. I had no idea what a resistor and a capacitor was, but so it began. But that was about 1972, and that was the same year that I was at school in Bude, in Devon, and there's a story I've written up in Retro Game about this. The teacher on a school outing gave me a £5 to go and buy 45 ice creams or something for all the other kids. And I took a shortcut through one of those arcade seafront things, and there was all these mechanical games, and one yellow one. It was called Pong. And hang on, I've got a prop. So, arcade stuff. Who remembers this?
Wow.
Now this is actually mine at home, because 40 odd years later I thought, I've got to pay homage to what started it all. So I found one of these on eBay. This is about 20 years ago when eBay just started. And I bought this from a guy in California, which was an experience because I had to figure out how to fly it over here. And he had it because it was a repossession from someone who hadn't paid a car bill. He ran a garage. And the photographs are all of it in amongst a whole load of cars. So, yeah.
There can't be many of those left in the world, though.
I don't know how many, but not many. And this was the first one in Europe that I knew of. And the serial number, if you look at it, is AA0003. So possibly one of the very, very earliest ever made. And it just happened to be found in a garage. You know, some Rolls-Royce bloke in Hollywood hadn't paid his bill. So.
And all those components are like hand-built, aren't they? So there's a baking tray and stuff.
You can just see, oops, I've got no zoom in on this. There's a circuit board on the left there, and it's incredibly primitive electronics. There's no processor, there's no RAM, ROM, nothing. It's just logic and timing. It's ingenious how it works. Touchscreen as well. Hang on, we'll get there. This isn't my PC, by the way. Right, so there's your Pong PCB. It's covered in TTL, and there's not a lot of it. And if you zoom in, it gives the date of the batch when this PCB was run. And if you look at it, it actually says Pong by Syzygy, which was Atari's name round about the same time before they trademarked the word Atari. So that's an interesting PCB. £1,000 on eBay if anyone wants it.
And I love the date code on that, 1973.
Yeah, 23rd of March. So what else have we got? That's a computer space actually. Right, here is my other top possession, which is a computer space machine, and both of these things work. The funny thing is, they're not much fun. I've actually got a video of computer space working somewhere. Let's see if I can find that. I'm going to have to jump about here, folks, because this is not my PC, and if I can find it.
Because Computer Space was a very early title, wasn't it?
It was done in 1969 and manufactured in 1971. Now this game is the template for all video games that came after it, produced by Nolan Bushnell and Atari. And as you guys probably know, Nolan Bushnell is pretty much the godfather of the games industry worldwide. So this is a very short video of it working, I think. No? Wait, your machine's not working. Hang on. Let's try and open it with something else. Now you can just about make out, it looks like a very primitive asteroid. You can just about see a bullet going across. There's probably there is sound, but you probably can't hear it. But there you go, a real live working computer space machine. It's probably the only one in Europe.
I mean, even before the arcades became prevalent, I mean, you were into electronics because you were actually quite impressed with digital watches as well, weren't you?
That's opening up a big subject. Digital watches, okay, hang on a sec.
So a lot of people forget that, you know, before, a lot of these computer companies that went into making computers later on actually made digital watches and calculators before that. But do you remember when you first saw a digital watch?
Yeah. When I was 12 or 13, and I remember seeing Tomorrow's World with Raymond Baxter, and that was about 73, and he brought out an LED watch made by Pulsar. And if you watch James Bond Live and Let Die, he's got a Pulsar, and it's called a P2, and I was mesmerised by that watch. You know, where it's magnetic, oh that's the Rolex, isn't it? And he presses it at 5:48 in the morning, and some young lady gets out of bed that it shouldn't have been there. And I was like, wow, I've got to have one of those. But it was like £500 in 1973. So, and there's me doing a paper round for £2 a week. So anyway, as time went on, the price of these watches dropped, and I saved up, I think, 20 quid, and I bought myself my first LED watch, which I've still got, and it still works, it still keeps time. And I couldn't really afford much else, but with the advent of eBay 20, 30 years later, and a few bob in the bank from actually being paid for a change by publishers, because they usually don't, I sort of went a bit mad. So I've got a whole load of photographs of some unusual watches. If this works. Right, that isn't digital, but it runs on body heat.
Wow. No batteries at all?
No,
body heat?
Body heat, yeah. That is digital, obviously. That's 1974. That's just an elegant Seiko, very early watch. The world's first six-digit LCD. World's first solar-powered watch.
When was that from then? 1978? Wow.
Yeah. Still got that. That still works. Yeah. And then I started going a bit mad, and I started collecting calculator watches for some bizarre reason. So there's a few calculator watches. This one here, this is a HBO one. This is now everyone's favourite watch because of a certain bloke on YouTube called Techmo. If anyone watches Techmo. I don't think he bought the last one I sold, but he got a very nice one from somewhere.
Is that the one with the stylus, where you press the little keys inside it?
Yeah. This is a Casio flip top. It's actually got a normal watch on the other side, and I've got a photograph of that. This is one of my restorations. This is a Hua Chrono Split going from that, 50 quid on eBay, to this, which I think went to about 1,700 quid. So if you've got any of these at home, polish them up. That's what it looks like when it's running.
A lot of those watches, then you had to hold down a button for the display, did you?
No, you just had to flick your wrist.
Like the Apple Watch?
Yeah, people forget this. 40 years ago, before Apple thought of it. This is an interesting watch because it's got an astrological dial, and it's a little bit difficult to see at night, so can't quite see the point. And Seiko did one as well as Citizen. Now this is nuts. This is a 42 button calculator watch with all sorts of statistical stuff on it. But how the hell you'd enter, 100 different numbers and then do a mean deviation or something?
It looks great though.
Oh, it looks wonderful, yeah.
Well, I mean, after watches, how did you get into computers then? Was that around the same
Just
time?
flick through the rest of this. Okay. This what's called an early binary watch, which are now being remade and sold by Fossil and stuff. How bizarre is that? Yeah, and apparently that's 1242, and you all knew that. Oh yeah, and then my OCD went just a little bit completely mad, and that's half the collection. So yeah, I've got a whole room full of them. So that's a dynamic scattering watch, extremely rare. That's a calculator watch that flips open. National Semiconductor made that with a light. LED. Just who knew Omega made LED watches? Anyway, oh yeah, and that's how complex they once were in 1972. And each of those numbered chips is a different set of logic gates. That's how they had to do it in those days. So, yeah. Anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, computers. You originally got into them by building your own.
I did.
How did you discover how to do that then?
Necessity. Hang on, let me show you some electronics then. Okay, the first thing I ever built was in 1974. It was a Matchbox radio. I made it out of various bits. I got it into a radio about this size, and it still works. Well, on AM, but okay. Then in 1978, I had to do a school project, and it was supposed to be something simple like a 2-transistor amplifier. But I went completely nuts and spent a whole year building this thing. This is actually an LED matrix display on one end, oscilloscope, and it's just a little bit more complex than the teacher was expecting. And apparently I got 99% or something, because in those days you got percentages in the whole of the UK for the O-level. But I failed my English 3 times, so I'm pretty crap at languages. So but electronics and programming, a little bit different. So yeah, that's a bit of a serious project, and I still play around with electronics today. I've got this is more modern. This is a device I invented a few years ago. Basically, it's a bottle warmer that runs on lithium batteries, and it heats up milk and baby stuff as quick as a microwave oven, but on the move. And it's designed to look like something that Apple produced. So this is me making a prototype. So.
Your house must be like Doc Brown from Back to the Future's house.
Yeah, that's what everybody says, except the main bit where I live, which is a normal house. Yeah, so that's a bit of electronics. And then the other thing is calculators. Yeah, you're asking just now about how did I get into programming and stuff. Yeah, so in about 1975-6, I was following every arcade game that came out. I mean, I was addicted. I would hunt down arcade games. I would persuade my granddad to take me to Southend-on-Sea, where there's pier-front arcade machines, but they were all 10 pence, and I was a bit crap at them. So, come the advent of personal computers and building them, I actually went and built quite a few NASCOM 1s, CompuKits, and all sorts of other very prehistoric computers. And then, once you've done that, what do you do? So I started writing simple games, and the very first game I ever wrote was called Death Race, and it was a simple black and white driving game in 1977. And I sold a few copies to mates on cassette and stuff. We had cassette interfaces in those days, before 64, And then I started building calculators. So does anyone, I don't think you're going to zoom in on this, does anyone remember these? This is a Sinclair wristwatch calculator kit.
And does that still work?
Yeah, hold that. Fresh battery.
Wow.
But it has to run next to the battery now, because the one's inside, I can't get out. Yeah, so the next thing that happened was I bought myself one of these, which is, hang on, I'll turn it on. That's a 1976 Texas SR56 programmable calculator with 100 programming steps in it, and it's pretty slow, but this taught me how to program with only 100 bytes of code and how to write really tight code, because there was no other way of doing it. And I used to use that to do dodgy things in exams, because they hadn't banned calculators at that point, because no one had one. So Yeah, well, that still works. That's what, 43 years old, 42 years old.
Well, I imagine back then the arcades must have seemed like a magical place. I mean, what was that kind of early arcade atmosphere like going in there as a kid?
They weren't on high streets. There was one on Bandits in high streets, but if you went to seaside resorts and stuff like that, you would see very early Atari games, Cinematronics, and very early games from those guys, black and white stuff, vector games, stuff like that. And occasionally, if you went into London, you go up and down Tottenham Court Road, around Leicester Square. There was all sorts of arcades around there. And yeah, I used to skive off school and take my, £1 of 10p pieces and attempt to get as much play as I could. So yeah, I was pretty hooked at an early age, I think.
Well, your first commercial release was Dropzone,
yeah,
which was a clone of Defender. How did you get into kind of commercially releasing a game?
Everyone says it's a clone of Defender, but sideways scrolling shoot 'em ups were what was happening after Space Invaders, and then Scramble came out, then Defender. But I was a big fan of anything to do with Eugene Jarvis. So, Stargate was my favourite. Defender was pretty hard as well, and I used to rip the skin off my finger from going up and down, and yeah, I think everyone did that. I've got a Robotron thumb on the other side as well. So, when I left university, my first job was a contract with Atari UK, which I thought was a real privilege because I was such a fan of Atari. And so off I went and did some contract work for them, but in the background I was working on what became Dropzone. And Atari took one look at it and thought, wow, got to have that, because they were looking for a licensed version to put out as Defender, the official game. So they looked at Dropzone and thought, well, you're going to have to convert it. I thought, yeah, okay, but anyone who's seen the actual Atari 800 cartridge version of Defender that they did put out, it's awful. It runs at about 10 frames a second, and it's actually an Apple game. Just written in machine code, no special effects, no hardware, no nothing. And it's just unplayable. But they did it because, if I'm led to believe rightly, there was a conversation on a golf course and a brown paper bag with some money in it, and it was an American side deal. So, yeah, which was a real shame. So I then had to find a publisher for it, and US Gold came along, and Bob was your uncle.
I mean, did Eugene Jarvis know about Dropzone, or what did he think of it when he eventually found out about it?
Yeah, I've got a picture of him somewhere, because I do actually know him. Hang on, folks. I've got some interesting pictures of Jimmy White here.
I'm looking forward to getting onto Jimmy White later.
Having said that, you can't find a picture of Eugene Jarvis.
But yeah, Defender was such a fast game, wasn't it, as well? So getting that frame rate right was totally needed.
Here we go. Right, this is an article I wrote for Retro Gamer, that's 15 years ago. What this shows is myself and Eugene in America, and we had a game of Robotron whilst talking about games he had on MAME. And he said, oh yeah, I've got this Dropzone game. And oh yeah, that's the one I wrote. And he says, really? And he actually said, no, inspiration is not infringement. And I've never forgotten that. I've got me back over. He's a big games player, and he's damn good at Robotron as well. So,
and there are people that consider Dropzone to be a better game than Defender as well.
I've seen that online, mainly because I got infield landscape. So yeah.
What happened to Dropzone 2?
I've got photographs of that. I've got photographs of everything. Just 1 second.
Because the first game was a big hit, wasn't it? So it seemed logical that you'd follow it up.
There was Super Dropzone, which came out in '94 on the SNES, and it's been licensed on to GBA, GBC, all sorts, PlayStation, But Dropzone 2 is an absolutely massive game, and it looks a little bit like this. So you're flying around a procedurally generated landscape, and you can deform the planet by shooting holes in it and stuff like that. And the key thing with this, these are renders and stuff, was this. Instead of having a sideways 2D landscape, you had a whole three-dimensional spinning planetoid, and the idea was to gain control of regions of it bit by bit, whilst the aliens were trying to gain it back. and you had to, the game was about winning a certain percentage control of the planet, and then it would spring into life, and green stuff would grow all over it, and then there would be another planet, and then the aliens would be pretty angry. But yeah, this was all done 12, 13 years ago, so just never saw the light of day. So,
why?
Money. It's quite an expensive game, but when you pitch this sort of thing to publishers, they go, "You want how much?" But you know, if you want a game that's looking like that on a PS4 or something, it's not going to cost 50 quid. It's a few £1 million worth of development involving 100 people for 2 years. That's hard work.
Well, what was your kind of favourite system to develop on back then when you were making these games?
There wasn't any. No. I wrote Dropzone on an Atari itself with a plug-in cartridge that was an assembler cartridge, but that actually turned out to be really slow. So I ended up using an Atari internal macro assembler, and I think Dropzone fitted on 4 floppies. You know, it was a real nightmare to try and link all 4 lumps of code. But any utilities and stuff, we didn't know they were called utilities in those days. You just wrote it yourself. You know, whether it's graphics editor, you did a pixel thing in BASIC. If it's sound, you wrote something in machine code. That's the way it was done in the arcades as well. All the same things. And it wasn't until late 80s that someone invented the word tools. And then people say to me these days, well, so how did you do the AI in IK+? Well, it wasn't called anything back then. I just made the men fight each other with varying degrees of skill. And now it's called AI. So, yeah, we were talking about this on the way down.
Well, getting on to international karate, I mean, how did you hook up with System 3 for that game then?
Oh, long story. It was just after I'd finished Dropzone, and that was doing really well in the charts. And System 3 tracked me down via Zap magazine. They talked to Gary Penn, I think, one of the journalists who reviewed it, and rung me up and promised me the known universe if I would come and do this game that he had, or finish it off because one of the other programmers had done a runner. So, I don't know whether John Hare's here. Is he in the audience?
Here tomorrow, but no, was he the original programmer then?
No. Okay. He was the original artist, and I think we never figured out who, someone did 5 pages of Z80 code, and that was the problem. It was just diabolical, whatever it was. And I just took one look and thought, no, but what I can do is rewrite it from scratch and reverse it into the Dropzone game shell, take out all the space stuff and put in all the karate stuff, and invent all sorts of ways of compressing animation and graphics and stuff. And yeah, that's more or less what happened. But it did take 6 months or so. Then it went into America, and unbeknown to me, went to #1 on the Billboard charts. And then System 3 kept a little bit quiet about that until someone sent me a copy of Billboard with an arrow saying, "What's that?" And I went, "Oh, royalties," which I never got. And of course, System 3 maintained throughout that they never got paid either. And then there was a massive legal case because Data East, who produced Karate Champ, came out of the blue and said, "Oi, you've copied our game." And their lawyers were saying that I had copied the code, whereas there's no way I copied the code. I mean, there was a lot of karate games back then. There was Exploding Fist on the 64 and stuff, which was brilliant. Absolutely love that game. Karate Champ in the arcade, you know, and various other ones. And I just thought, no, I'm going to do a better version of all of them and just fill it up with special effects and everything else. But what happened was the legal case flattened Epix, the US publisher, and it went on for about 2 years, and eventually I was asked to do a statement to the court to justify that it wasn't, I hadn't ripped off someone else's karate code. And all I said in a statement was that it's a karate game with karate moves, with karate uniforms, karate sound effects, karate everything, and you can't copyright karate. And it doesn't look like Karate Champ, so what's the problem? And eventually the Supreme Court in America said, yep, we'll accept that, and we'll invent a whole new bunch of laws called look and feel laws, and because of World Karate Championship, otherwise known as IK1. So it's all my fault. Well, that's what I've been told anyway.
Well, karate was huge then, wasn't it, with Karate Kid?
Mid-80s, wow, everything. I mean, Fists sold, I don't know, millions and millions. And I remember playing that until the sun came up and broke joysticks and all sorts. So, and my mate Barry has never forgiven me for that, keeping him up all night. Hours and hours and hours on it. Trying to get that ball to run across the screen, and do you remember all that?
Well, I remember International Karate on the Commodore 64, that soundtrack by Rob Hubbard. I mean, that was like nothing else I'd ever heard at the time. I mean, were you really impressed with Rob's work on it?
Well, IK1 was, whilst I did all the code, Rob did all the music, I did all the sound effects. But Mark Kell, System 3, basically was fairly adamant that we would have something that sounded like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Or is that the David Bowie thing? I've forgotten the name of it. So Rob said, okay, well, that's not infringement. Let's make something similar, and re-expressed it, and yeah, the music's addictive. I mean, I've actually got, this is how sad I am, I've got that on a memory stick in the car. Along with a lot of other game stuff, so yeah.
The sound effects as well, they were awesome. Like, how did you improve then on International Karate with International Karate Plus?
Well, obviously the key thing with IK Plus is the third player. And the reason that came about is because at the time there were other karate games where they would show a backdrop of a dojo with half a dozen players waiting on the side to come out and fight you. And I had this idea that I wanted each player to get up when it was his turn and walk onto the main fighting area, and the other one to go back. So I was mucking around with various ideas for that, and I thought, hang on a minute, I've got enough sprites and characters here to actually do a third fighter. So I had all these. It was a nightmare because I used all the sprites on two of the players, and the third player is actually character block bitmaps. But then, depending on who's winning, they're in front or behind of the others. So, yeah, it was a nightmare. But the sound effects, everyone asked me how do I do the sound effects. Now, half of them I did do myself by running around the house and hitting things with wooden spoons and going, you know, and this sort of thing, and then editing it with a machine code editor. But there were a couple that came, and I fully admit this, out of Into the Dragon. Because I wrote to Warner Brothers, who owned the IPR for that film, and they eventually wrote back and said, if it's less than 4 second sample, there's nothing we can do about it, and good luck. And I've still got that letter just in case.
Sample anything though, didn't they? It was like the games industry was a bit like the Wild West, I guess.
They were sampling each other. Yes.
What about those different fighting sections as well? Because they had, I remember defending things coming at you with a shield from different angles, and that really kind of split up the gameplay, which was really good.
Yeah, there was the deflecting bombs, bouncing bombs, and then there was the bombs that would bounce on and you had to kick them off. But the trouble was I only had so much memory, and I wanted to have loads of levels, but I just ran out of memory. So there's only 2 levels. But the one, the funnest one is where you're moving the arm up and down, trying to knock the bouncing balls off. Now that, fun enough, was inspired by a Game & Watch game in 1980 called Manhole. Anyone collects Game & Watch? No? Oh, chat over there. Have you got one? But it involves trying to make a bridge appear on 6 positions on the screen, and it just gets faster and faster. And I found it really addictive. So it seemed natural to try and mimic the same addiction by having the karate guy moving the shield up and down. So that's where that came from.
In IK Plus, there was a lot of Easter eggs in that game, I read, like about 40, 45, was there, or more?
There was an article in Retro came about this, because I unveiled a few. Yeah, there's actually more. There's 60 or 70, but I've forgotten them all. There's daft ones, like if you type in Germ, G-E-R-M, all the language goes into German, because one of my mates was German. His name was Axel. He ended up in the EU, God bless him. As in within the Brussels. So yeah, he converted the whole game into German. But no, there was all sorts of dodgy ones, you know, swear words and stuff would actually reset the game. And there was lots of messages to mates and stuff, and things that speeded it up, things that slowed it down, things that changed the angle of the slant of the shadows at the bottom of the screen, etc., etc.
If you do a bit of Googling, you'll find those things. You published it in Retro Game.
I have had a look a couple of times, but the article for IK Plus is out there somewhere, but there's numerous websites that are like fan sites for IK Plus, and they seem to have hacked the game and found them out.
Well, Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker was a total revolutionary game. I remember seeing it on Games Master back in the days with you on it.
Yeah, it was the last game I ever produced on my own without a publisher interfering with it, because they normally try and, you know, double the cost by interfering, and everything takes twice as long. So as a result, we had 3 months of PR with no development. So what happened with that game, it was originally called 147, and there was a wonderful animated screen that looks a little bit like IK Plus with little dots flying around everywhere. And we were showing it off in June 91, 3 months before it was released, and it was on the Virgin stand, and a certain Mr. Jeremy Beadle who was doing all those TV programs at the time, he walked out of nowhere and said, "That game plays like Jimmy White," to one of the Virgin guys, who fortuitously said, "Oh, do you know him?" And I sort of came over and said, "Yeah, do you know him? Have you got his number?" And he said, "Yeah." So he whipped out his phone and had a number for Barry Hearn, who was Jimmy's agent. And 48 hours later, we went over to Romford and met Jimmy, met Barry Hearn. And within about half an hour, it was like, "Yeah, we'll give you loads of money." And sign here, son, and that was it.
So without Jeremy Beadle, Jimmy White wouldn't have been involved?
It may not have happened. Yeah, we looked at Stephen Hendry, but the publisher thought he was a bit too mechanical, whereas Jimmy White does have quite a wild gameplay. And if you look at the game, Jimmy White does actually play a pretty wild game. So yeah, it was just one of those moments in life where you thought, wow, what a good luck chance that was.
Well, obviously then you had to promote the game with Jimmy, which I imagine was quite interesting. I know, but then you were on Motormouth doing an interview and he wasn't there. It was just you. What happened there?
Have you got that?
I don't know. Have you got the?
I haven't got the clip on there, but does anyone remember seeing Motormouth in 1991? Yeah. Okay, well it is on YouTube if you want to go and have a look. Yeah, what happened there was this was Virgin's first massive, big, live expose to the world of Jimmy White Snooker, and yeah, we had to get there the Friday night for a rehearsal at 7 in the morning, and it was going out live at about 9:15, something like that. Anyway, the problem was Jimmy didn't turn up on the Friday night to have a pie and a pint, so that was a bit of a nuisance. So 6 o'clock on the Saturday morning, the producer is ringing Jimmy's house and his wife's answering, and then they sent a taxi round, and she answered the door and said, "Yeah, he's just getting up." And that was about 6:30. And then the taxi driver knocks on the door again about 10 minutes later, and she says, "He's just having a shave." And another 10 minutes later, "He's just having his flakes." And he went on like this for about an hour, one excuse after another, and he didn't materialise. And then after another hour, when there was virtually no chance of getting into the studio, and they were talking about helicopters and stuff, she eventually comes to the door on a Saturday morning and said, "I'm terribly sorry, but he's not here. He went out for a drink on Monday."
And this was Saturday morning?
This was Saturday morning, and he really had gone out for a drink and disappeared. And yeah, what happened then was they were talking about pulling the slot, but they didn't have anything else to put in it. So I'm in the studio, dressed up in my snooker gear, begging for this thing not to be pulled. And Andy Kramer's there, and he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll put Jimmy's gear on, which was too big for him, it's too baggy, and I'll try and play snooker," and he can't. But nonetheless, it made for good footage, and it was completely live, unscripted, unrehearsed, and went well. And I think I walked off stage and collapsed.
But there's also a story about Richard Branson as well, and Jimmy White. There was
there's loads of stuff about that. I need to get this video out there because one of the 4 extra days he gave us was to do some filming for a Channel 4 company called a program called 6:30 something. It was a news broadcast that went out 6:30 about stuff in the media. And Virgin said, "Well, this game's doing rather well." The day one ship out was tens of hundreds of thousands, whatever it was. And Branson himself said, "Oh yeah, I'll do half hour." So result, So I had to ensure Jimmy was going to turn up. I had to go and collect him and then drive through South London to get to Branson's house, which was a nightmare. But halfway through London, Jimmy says, "Oh, there's a pub, I own it." And I thought, oh no. So he stops and had a swift 6 pints. And I had just a half. I only had half of that, I only drunk half it. Yeah, it was water blessed by a saint because I was driving, honest. Anyway, we then had, this is before sat-nav, we then had a nightmare finding Branson's house, but we eventually got there. And we go in, and the first thing Branson does is, "Well, hello chaps, have a gin and tonic." And he empties half a bottle into a huge glass, and That finished me off and definitely finished Jimmy off. Anyway, what happened was the TV crew turned up, we went upstairs, there's a big snooker room he's got and a magnificent table, and they started filming the bit. Now there's two things that happened. One was that this was 91. No one had ever seen icons before. This was before Windows sort of thing. So the Amiga, the version that was playing, was on a table with a monitor behind it and Jimmy and Branson, and neither of them have ever used a mouse before. So how are we going to film them playing the game? So on the footage, there's two pairs of hands belonging to Jimmy and Branson, and I'm underneath the table with a hand like this, looking at a monitor under the table, trying to control the game, whilst Branson's going, yeah, see, I'll just put a bit of chalk on, like, you know. So, yeah, anyway, the funniest bit was, with all the gin and tonics flowing and the 6 pints earlier, Jimmy is trying to play around with Branson, and he just can't get a ball in. There's no chance. The ball misses the pocket by miles, and Branson sort of says, "We're paying you loads of money and you're crap at snooker." And Jimmy says, "Yeah, but the pockets are really tight." And Branson says, "Virgin table." At which point the TV crew go, cut, can't have that, no. Yeah, oh, bloody hell.
Promo videos and stuff with him then, was that interesting, like trying to get him to present these?
Hang on, I've got some video.
Okay.
Video, hang on a minute, let's get rid of that.
This footage from which year we're talking here then?
Hang on, let's just, I've got various.
These are the outtakes, I think.
Hang on. These are actually photographs from Cue Ball 2. So let's have a quick flick through those and I'll show you some videos. Right, this is a studio shot with us supposed to be in casino mode. And if you look at Jimmy, he's had one too many. He's half cut. And these girls, they were the models for the studio pics later on. And I'm just looking also rather sophisticated and not drunk. Anyway, right, so what else? This is a clip I'll show you in a sec where Jimmy is doing speech to camera, introducing various levels of Cue Ball World. This is something we mopped up in the office and gave it to him when he came up once. So, yeah, ancient PR. Oh, I look like his bouncer here. This is outside the Virgin Megastore just before he got mobbed. So, this is actually a painting I did on a swimming pool wall, and that shows me, Branson and Jimmy. And that was before he had one too many. So that's another one in Virgin Megastore somewhere. Well, this is when he came up the office one day to technically advise on ball movement whilst reading Edge, as you do. Did you know he could program?
No, I didn't believe that.
This is rehearsing his lines for the video I'm going to show you. This was for Paul, Archie McLean's Paul, and we were going to call it Jimmy's Paul Shark. So I managed to talk him into getting into his pool in his outfit, which then shrunk. So there he is in the office, having a laugh. PR. Oh yeah, he's got this pit bull terrier that swallowed a cue ball. Sorry, it really did swallow a cue ball.
But that hurt coming out the other end.
He had to go to the vets after this because the dog couldn't cough it up. So it's like a giant gobstopper, you know. It's a bit of a difficult thing to swallow as well. Anyway, right. So these let's show some videos. So
we did it sound for this video?
Huh?
We need some sound for this video.
Yes, we do. Got to find it first. Hang on. Right, I'm not sure these are going to work, but let's see. Right, in Cue Ball World there were dozens of levels where Jimmy would introduce each level or come on screen at the end of a level and say, "You did all right, my son." So, and I'll show you a few of these because for every good take we had about 10 that were wrong, and he knows professionally to swear so that we have to cut it out. And then we did a compilation of all the swearing bits. So, for example, this one, if it works.
My name's White, James White, and he's a real test of the nerve.
Hang on a sec, folks. Yeah, I'll try the VLC. So, whose laptop's this?
My name's White, James White, and he's a real test of the nerve.
Yeah, anyway, so there were loads of these sort of odd clips.
And they're actually in the game?
Hang on, I'll try it with something else. Windows Media Player, let's try that.
That's it, you're champion of American Rules 8 ball. Sorted.
Yeah, hang on a sec, folks.
That's it, you're champion of American Rules 8 ball. Sorted.
Sorted. So, have you got any others?
Turning into a right cue ball ninja, aren't you? But can you beat the potting machine?
You get the idea?
Yeah, okay.
Right, now what we then did is we compiled, if I can find it, all the outtakes into the Jimmy Bollocks video. So any young children in the audience? So,
cover their ears.
Sound.
Bollocks. 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 Sorry. Bollocks. 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 Sorry.
Who wants to see it again?
That should have been in the game.
Bollocks. 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 Sorry. Bollocks. 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 Sorry.
I mean, the actual game itself had a lot of personality too. I remember, you know, when you played the game, if you took a bit too long on one of the shots, the balls would start making faces at you and flies would start landing on the table. I mean, how did you come up with those kind of ideas?
That's the first one, so I'll just get to it. Well, that's some poser in Jimmy White. That's a Games Master episode where, for the Dreamcast version. Let me get to it. Chart hits. Where are we? Right, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always wanted to do games that had endearment and games that didn't just go static. Because at the time, a lot of games, if you didn't play them, they were just static. So what's the point? So I used to wait. I had a little timer running in the background, and you know, after 30 seconds or so, the balls would start pulling faces and what have you. So I've got something like that, along with sort of sound effects. So and then there were flies that would walk all over the screen, and that was inspired because working at night in the countryside, in the middle of summer, little flies would turn up and walk all over the screen, and it used to annoy the hell out of me. And then I thought, oh, I can mimic that. And I think I did a pretty good mimic of these flies, because Virgin got loads and loads of phone calls, their custom service, saying, I've got a virus version, or there's an error,
But you would play the game late at night in the summer, yeah?
Yes.
You would hit your screen like that.
I used to write code at 3 in the morning, because in those days it was before YouTube, before phone calls, before mobile phones. I just used to be able to concentrate. So I used to sleep at day and work at night, which is why I'm white.
But I mean, it was logical to do a pool game afterwards, and you were the headline on the pool game.
Yeah, because they were hoping to sell, Virgin were hoping to sell a lot of those in America, and who the hell knows me in America? So they approached Paul Newman just because of the film Colour and Money, if I remember rightly, and he said, no chance, not interested in games. Jimmy wasn't known, and just calling it Paul wasn't any good. So they trademarked my name and then put it on there anyway. So, yeah, I didn't mind, but, it was all to do with the trademark, to be honest. So,
well, by the time you got to kind of...
Oh, look, maths.
What do we have there?
These are just sample dev notes. This, in the old days, you used to have to design polygons and X and Y, Z coordinates and stuff. There was about 300 pages of maths that looked a bit like that, and it was a nightmare. I'm not even sure I could zoom in on that. Yeah, look, equations.
Oh, wow.
I could do it once. I think I'm a bit rusty now, but yeah.
I can see why you stayed up all night.
Well, all night, that was all year. God. Yeah. Anyway, what else have we got? Yeah, so
I was saying, with your later games, you kind of got into proper 3D rendering with some of the balls. Was it kind of basically better to use 3D, or was it easy to do in 2D as well?
Hang on, let me see that I've got some videos. Cue Ball World.
So what year was Cue Ball?
Jimmy White's one was 91. Cue Ball 2 was 98. Actually, I have got a video for Cue Ball 2. Now, this was done in 1996 to 98, so this is 22 years old. And this was just at the advent of 3D accelerators. So yeah, we made use of it. So this is radically different to the first one. So if you watch this, if it's going to work, there's audio. So in a minute.
Was in the 90s of hardware, 'cause that was less than half a decade after the original, and look how different it looks.
Well, there's a little bit of an omission with this because the underlying snooker code was exactly the same as Jimmy White's one. And don't tell Virgin that. Oh, damn. And what we actually did was add 99% of extra hard work for the all the rendering, the modelling and everything else. Did it add much to the game? Maybe. But was it worth the hassle and the time and the money and everything else? Not so sure. And then their hands, those animated gloves, were a huge, huge challenge. They're motion captured fingers, you know, which we were doing in '96. Actually, I'll show you some pictures of how we did it if you want. So,
yeah, who was it then?
Who did the gloves?
Yeah.
I'll show you. If I can find the photos. So, keep it to me. I'm wearing those. We bought these in America and they were like £10,000 courtesy of Virgin, and they measure all the individual movements of your fingers using resistive sensors that flex. So yeah.
It looked very realistic though.
Well, yes, because of my hands.
I had a good result.
The only thing is I can't actually really play snooker, but I can do sort of, you know.
You can mime it.
Yeah, we tidied it up in post.
I was saying, you know, the stuff that you did have in that game though, there was even like bonus games in there. Wasn't the Dropzone in that game?
There was. I'm not sure I got photographs of it. We had a fully playable checkers game. But the game was originally called Q because of a ball with a Q pointing into it, so we left the logo in. Random pictures of Jimmy all over the pool room. Oh, right. This is a secret Tom and Jerry mouse room, which I don't think anyone's ever found. But once you go in there and look around, it unlocks all sorts of cheats in the game. So it is in there. It's behind the clock in the corner if anyone ever wants to play again. There it is, through the mouse hole.
And as far as you know, no one's found them?
We didn't get any letters about it, because usually you do. There was, hang on, that's the pool room. Dropzone's in that cocktail table on the left.
Everyone will be going home to try it now.
Sorry?
Everyone will be going home to try it now.
Yeah. That was their music interface. There was other cheats. Oh yeah, you could play darts. Proper. That was a really good version actually, with the way the mouse worked. And there was a cheat with that. If you turned it round, there was a video playing on the back of the dartboard. But I don't think anyone's found that. I think I made them too hard. So this was a joke because we wanted an attract mode, and anyone here who's into maths knows what a B-spline is. So this was the B-spline curve, or otherwise known as a Bezier curve. And yeah, we just followed it around the table just to bring the game to life. Yes. And everyone seemed to like it back then. So, well, there he is looking at the Virgin logo.
But were you involved with the port for the Dreamcast version as well?
There's a hidden button. don't press the red button.
Where's that in the game then?
I can't remember where that was. I think it was behind one of the seats in the ballroom. If you pressed it, your machine reset. So don't press it.
Were you involved in like the Dreamcast port and like
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were they interesting to do, like the consoles of the time?
Dreamcast was a nightmare because it only had 16 megabytes in it, but 12 megabytes of it was taken up by WinCE, which sat there and did absolutely nothing. So we had a lot of stuff streaming off the CD drive, whatever it was in that. So yeah, nightmare.
Well, after that, I mean, you went on to do some Wii games, didn't you? Which you did a puzzle game, you did a driving game as well?
There was Pool Paradise in 2004. Oh, I've got some good videos of that from it. Pool Paradise. Then there's Mercury in 2005, and then there was a Wii game in 2010 that got very successfully published in America, but totally destroyed in the UK for all sorts of interesting reasons. But I've got some cool video, so if you want to watch the video, all right, and then we'll take some questions. All right, so
give you guys a chance to ask some questions. Let's have a little think.
Videos. So, right, Pool Paradise. Pool Paradise was the last of the big Jimmy games, and it's the fourth one in the series. And it was completely nuts. It was set on a desert island, and it was just a good excuse for 3D rendering with shadows and reflections and everything else. Now what I've got is a compilation again, and this is to classical music, and it basically, well, have a watch. Music. Let me put it out as an official trailer.
Those physics still look incredible. Okay, has anyone got any questions for Archer? Just raise your hand. One at the back over there.
Who wants to see the Mercury video? It's about 90 seconds. Yeah, okay. So, answer this, I think.
Got a question here.
Hang on a sec, chaps, just show you this one last video, which is that one.
This was a puzzle game you did?
Yeah, kind of. Bit of a big one.
What was the idea behind the game? What did you have to do then?
Well, it was simply inspired by those little puzzles you get in Crackers where you've got little ball bearings and you've got them in holes, and I just wanted to do a game that was based on the simplicity of that, using colour, sound and logic with virtually nothing else. And it spawned this huge game with 72 levels and 12 hidden levels and 2 ultra secret levels, and I'm not even sure that anyone ever finished it.
That kind of reminds me of the Liquid Terminator, the Terminator 2 movie.
Yeah, I remember that. That film came out the same week that Jimmy White's One was launched. Okay. And I'm a big fan of Arnie, music.
And this game was very big in America.
It was a launch title, and I think it was #1, and I've done an award for it somewhere. Well, 2 or 3 awards. I'll show you those in a second. Just got a couple of pictures to show you of that, and then we'll take some questions. Gained Mercury. Not sure. Hang on a sec. Yeah. You were saying just now what inspired me.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
One of those. And so this is Cue Ball 2, where we had a tilting level controlled by the mouse. I mean, a ball rolling around in a maze. And it was then I thought, we'll put a blob of mercury in there, and we had to come up with the physics for a blob, which looked like that initially. And anyone wants to know, the reflection in the mercury is my kitchen. Because we had to texture map something on the mercury. Then we tried different colours, then we thought about putting additional colours in, and then the whole idea of the colour logic sprang out of that. And yeah, the rest is history. Also, it went out, hang on. Well, I could sit here all day and talk about this.
Well, is there any questions for Archer?
It's got to be one. He's looking ready.
You've obviously got plenty of, that was loud, shit. You've also got plenty of videos, photographs, development documents. Any plans to release those as a book or an archive of some sort?
Well, at the moment I'm not actually doing game stuff. Believe it or not, I'm tied up with renewable energy, and I've gone back to my electronics roots. But having said that, there is various things afoot to do something with IK++. Possibly Mercury actually, and possibly Dropzone. There's all sorts of things that may happen soon, because I've spent the past 8 years playing around with electronics. So.
Any other questions?
It's got to be more than one.
Any more going down here in the front?
What do you,
Thank you.
what do you attribute to your success and longevity in the game industry?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
What do you attribute to your success and longevity in the game industry?
Well, I would say about 70% of the contracts I've ever signed have always involved in a legal case to get paid. So I think the percentage for other people was about 95%, where they just die after their first game. So, but no, I'm persistent, tenacious, and love games. You know, that's ever since I was playing Pong as a 10-year-old. That's what I've always wanted to do. But these days, you know, the game budgets are tens of millions, or even 100 million in a couple of cases, and massive teams, huge efforts, big publishers, licenses for everything, 2-3 years, by which time the platform's disappeared and something else has come along. So, yeah, there's major challenges compared to when I was doing it, which was typically 6 months a year, 18 months or whatever. Doing them on my own was so much more fun, because it's just me to do my own thing. And when you start running a large company, I mean, Mercury got up to 50, 60 people on the whole team, on the whole company, and yeah, that was quite a nightmare. But we had a really good team, and we produced a great product. So,
Have a question there as well?
Yeah, I've got one. Just a silly one. Yeah, about the T button on the Amiga, on IK++.
Can't really hear.
Can you repeat, Ravi?
Yeah, it's just... Oh, sorry. Could you just move that?
Turn the speaker off.
Yeah, it's just a silly question about the T button on the game IK+. What inspired it? You know the T button?
Oh, the trousers.
Yeah.
That just stemmed from... has anyone here seen Cannonball Run, the first one?
Yes.
Where Jackie Chan is having a fight scene with loads of bikers and stuff. And there's a fight scene where he does a double head kick and knocks out 2 people at once. And it was the animation for that I used the sort of a rotoscoping technique to actually put into the game. But later on in the film, he's having a fight with someone and someone kicks him and his trousers drop down. And he goes, ooh, you know, so I thought, that's a good thing to put in a game, why not? So yeah, and that's basically where it came from. But look online, there's 60 other cheats that do other things.
Any final questions for Archer? Well, there's one more from me. Are you still in touch with Jimmy White?
Yep. He rang up not so long ago from the car. He was driving up the M40 and ran out of petrol. So he wanted to know where the nearest petrol station was. So I said, what you need is an electric car, because I'm into Teslas these days. And he said, what's one of them? And he needs to go in yours. We'll sell him on the future. So yeah, that sort of randomly happens. And yeah, he keeps in touch. I mean, I went to his birthday party. I've got some photographs of that, don't I?
Yeah.
Anyone want to see Jimmy White's birthday party?
I'm quite curious, I must admit.
This was a bit weird. I got a phone call out of the blue. Jimmy Pics. Where's the Jimmy Pics? Here we go. Yeah, and what it was he had a birthday celebration in the Dorchester, and he and Ronnie Sullivan got together to do a championship match, and Ronnie actually beat him. I think Jimmy had a few points again. Now, what was interesting was there was a lot of royalty from the snooker business there, but the band playing in the background was the Rolling Stones, who I'd never seen live myself, so that was a bit of a turn-up.
Like showbiz do then?
Yeah, but when we all sat down to have dinner, I sat next to Michael Jackson. But that's not the real Michael Jackson.
I was going to say, what year was this?
But this was actually after the real Michael Jackson had headed north. So this guy was extremely convincing. And I was doing a double take saying, you've just faked your death. You're like a Howard Hughes or an Elvis or something, and you're really still alive. But he even spoke the same. That was a weird night, very weird night. Anyway, everyone got completely smashed, and I can't even remember how I got out. So.
Did Jimmy once give you a phone call and ask you if you could re-release Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker on the Wii or something for his daughter? I read once, but he was asking if that was possible.
There was some discussions on how quickly things could be converted. But the funniest thing was, back in '91, I remember, I think he's got 5 kids, and one of them had been born on the day that we were doing the Branson thing, which was a bit tricky because he was supposed to be changing nappies as well as doing this PR. And that girl, her name's Breeze, I think, as in wind. He rang up not so long ago and saying, if you're still running a games company, can she have a job as a graphics artist? And I'm going, hang on a minute, I remember seeing you Starkers once when you were having your nappy changed. It was a bit of a weird sort of memory, but unfortunately I wasn't running a team at that time, and I'm not sure where she ended up. She wanted to be in the games industry, so there you go.
Full circle then?
Full circle. So,
but you've been there, done it then, Archer?
Yeah, so I've been there, done it.
And got the t-shirt.
Dropzone t-shirt from 1994.
An original Dropzone? 94, okay.
European tour dates on the back.
Archer, it's been one. We could talk to you all night, but I know the Oliver twins are itching to get on the stage. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. Please give a big thank you to Archer Maclean.